Hello and welcome to Chapter 2 of our video series designed to share insight into the selection, seeding, and bracketing process for the Division I Women's Basketball Championship. Today, our focus will be on selecting the field. The first action item that takes place in the selection room is the 12-person committee's casting of their individual initial ballots. This generally takes place Wednesday afternoon. This is a relatively simple process that involves each committee member designating teams as tournament locks for at-large bids in the event they don't win their league's automatic bid, or designating them as under-consideration teams, meaning the committee member isn't fully convinced they are a tournament team, but at the very least think they possibly could get in over the course of discussion and further votes that will take place during the selection meeting. Committee members can vote up to 36 teams as at-large locks, though it is much more common for them to designate about 23 to 27 teams in this category. Committee members can vote as many teams as they'd like on their under-consideration lists. Only schools that merit serious consideration for a possible at-large berth to the tournament should be included. On average, about 30 schools receive this designation. Once each committee member electronically submits their ballot, the votes are tallied and two separate boards are created. The at-large board, consisting of teams that received enough support to be voted into the tournament as a result of the initial ballot, and the under-consideration board, which consists of teams that got enough support to merit discussion for possible inclusion into the field. Some of these teams will get into the field over the course of the week. Some, unfortunately for them, will not. So how does a team earn a spot on either the at-large or under-consideration boards? Teams getting all but 3 eligible votes as an at-large team are in the field. For most teams, that is a minimum of 9 of the 12 committee votes. However, since committee members may not vote for their own team, some teams require 8 of the maximum 11 at-large votes. If a team fell short of that threshold but received at least 4 votes as either an at-large or under-consideration team, it qualifies for placement on the under-consideration board. Teams that won their regular season conference championship and earned a number 1 seed in their conference tournament automatically get placed on the under-consideration board. This is what the initial ballot looks like. On each committee member's screen, he or she will see an alphabetical listing of each team eligible for the tournament, followed by buttons for at-large and under consideration. Teams that are ineligible to participate in the tournament have their voting buttons disabled, as do teams that have already won their conference tournament and thus earned the league's automatic qualifier. In addition, committee members may not vote for their own school. The examples shown here demonstrated that if a committee member was from Arizona, they would not be able to vote for the Wildcats. Otherwise, committee members can vote for as many teams under consideration as they deem worthy for possible inclusion into the field. Remember, though, there is a cap to the number of at-large schools a committee member can vote for. At the top of the screen, committee members will see both a counter for each of the categories, as well as a summary of the schools that have received their support. Once finished, the committee member will click the Submit button at the top of the page. After all 12 votes have been submitted and electronically tabulated, the 2 boards are formed. A list of teams that received at least 4 votes of support to merit inclusion on the under consideration board, and a list of teams that received all but 3 eligible votes and thus were voted into the tournament field. This means that for teams that haven't even started their conference tournament at this point on Wednesday, they're already in the field no matter what happens in their league tournament. An early loss or multiple wins could negatively or positively impact the seed they ultimately get in the NCAA tournament, but their place in the March Madness field is secure. You will also notice a list of schools that are already automatic qualifiers. Several conferences determine their AQ because their tournaments conclude prior to Wednesday's casting of the initial ballot. Those schools are already in the NCAA tournament, so when it comes to selecting teams, they are not part of any discussion. Only when the seeding process begins do those teams begin to get talked about. If a team fails to be included among the 4 teams receiving the fewest points for 2 consecutive ranked ballots, it shall be returned to the under consideration board. The committee's sole focus as it begins the selection process will be on the teams on the under consideration board. Remember, the teams on the at-large board, along with the teams on the AQ board, are already in the field. So now the committee's charge is to select additional teams not yet in the tournament. Each committee's computer screen will have a list of the under consideration teams, and each member is to select, in no particular order, the best 8 teams from this group. Here's what the screen will look like for each committee member. Keep in mind again, if a team that's represented by a committee member is among this list of schools, the voting button will be disabled for that member. Once 8 teams have been checked, the committee member hits the submit button. When all of the votes are in, the committee is informed of which 8 schools received the most votes. This is an alphabetical list. Committee members don't know how many votes any of these schools received. They just know these are the 8 with the most support. In this example, the 8 schools are Arkansas, Colorado, Creighton, Florida, Kansas, Kansas State, Miami, and South Florida. You see those schools in what's called the at-large holding cross-country board. The next step is to conduct a vote amongst these 8 teams, meaning each committee member will rank the teams in order. It's a cross-country vote, meaning a team received 1 point for a first-place vote and 8 points for an 8th-place vote. The 4 teams with the fewest points are in the field as at-large teams, while the other 4 remain in holding. This video shows you how it works. Once the process is complete, committee members will hit the submit button and the results are shared. On this screen, you will notice 4 new teams in the at-large field shown in red. These are the 4 teams voted in on that election. They include Colorado, Florida, Miami, and South Florida. The other 4 teams, Arkansas, Creighton, Kansas, and Kansas State, are in holding. The process then repeats itself. Of the teams remaining on the under consideration board, the committee will select the best 8 in no order. Since there are already 4 teams in holding, only the top 4 teams from this vote make it to the next cross-country at-large vote. Here, you'll see a smaller under consideration board. Remember, 4 teams have been voted to the field and 4 teams are in holding. Each committee member picks the best 8 from this list in no order and hits the submit button. The 4 teams receiving the most votes join the 4 holdovers. They are the teams in red: Dayton, Missouri State, Villanova, and Washington State, and they join Arkansas, Creighton, Kansas, and Kansas State for the next ranking vote. These 8 teams are then presented to the committee for another rank 8. Once again, the 4 teams with the fewest points from this cross-country ballot are in the tournament. The 4 who didn't get voted in remain in holding. In this example, the 4 teams voted into the field were Creighton, Kansas, Kansas State, and Washington State. You will also notice that the lowest 4 teams from the rank vote remain in the holding cross-country board: Arkansas, Dayton, Missouri State, and Villanova. However, if a team fails to be included among the 4 teams receiving the fewest points for 2 consecutive rank ballots, it shall be returned to the under consideration board. In this example, Arkansas fits the criteria and therefore will return to the under consideration board. This process repeats itself until 36 at-large teams have been selected. It's important to note that as you get later into the process and the number of teams on the under consideration board gets smaller, the number of teams you pick from a list and the number of teams you rank for a vote will decrease. This is commonly referred to as taking smaller bites at the apple. These steps are all spelled out in the Principles and Procedures document. It's also important to note that the process of selecting teams and seeding teams happens simultaneously. Throughout selection week, the committee's focus will shift back and forth from selecting at-large teams to seeding teams that are already in the field. Keep in mind, during selection weekend, conference play is still taking place, which could impact analysis of team resumes, even if a team has already been moved onto a board. This real-time analysis is conducted by the committee throughout the selection seeding, and bracketing process. As we draw near the conclusion of this video, we want to set the table for the next 2 chapters, in which we will next detail the seeding process followed by bracketing. Reminder that the 3 phases of this process are to select the best 36 at-large teams to join the 32 teams that earn the automatic qualifier into the championship, seed those teams in order from 1 to 68, and then bracket them using the prescribed principles.